Red flag or red light clients, as I like to call them, will tend to squish you down. They make you feel like you're groveling for every paycheck, that like you're greedy for asking for getting paid, and you are beholden to them. So I want you to kind of move away from working with these bad clients, and you can do any of these 5 things. I'm going to give you 5 different things that you can do to stop working with bad freelance writing clients. I'm Mandy Ellis, and I'm a 6-figure freelance writer who helps other freelance writers build high-earning businesses they adore without the overwhelm, the burnout, and of course, the red light, red flag clients. So let's get into it. We're no longer moving to clients who make us feel like we have to be mercilessly grateful for them just doing their job. So let's talk about number one. Number one thing here, check your contract. This is something that I tell my students all the time. Check your contract. What does it say about canceling the contract? What does it say about ending the work? What does it say about payment if you end the work? So you need to look at your contract. If you don't have a contract, you now need to work with a contract. You always need to have a contract, because these situations happen where it turns out that it's not a good fit, or you don't like the work, or you had a bigger project come up and you want to get out of this current one. So you need to have a contract. The other piece here is that if you have a contract, and you typically do that, you need to make sure that your contracts have a 15-day out. This is one of my favorite things to put in a contract. Is it says something along the lines of freelancer and client agree to give 15 days notice in the event of ending the contract, or in the event of one of them wants to cancel the contract. This is the cancellation clause. I would kind of use some specific language that makes it very clear that, hey, there's a time frame, 30 days, 15 days, however long your contract is. Like if it's a longer contract, like 6 months, I would give 30 days notice. If it's a shorter contract, like 1 month or 3 months, 15 days notice is fine. But you need to add that to your contract if you haven't already. This is how we kind of get away from like the just a writer people, or the ones who don't pay your invoice that you're chasing around, or the ones who ghost you when something important happens, right? So this is something that your contract needs to have in it. So check your contract with your client. Make sure that you're looking for verbiage that lets you out of the contract. And then for your future contracts, you need to make sure you have a 15-day out in there, so that for whatever reason, you can quit working with those red light clients immediately. Number two, I want you to start writing things down. This is something that I think gets missed all the time. Even if you have a contract, even if you have some green light clients, you need to know what to avoid. You need to write down those characteristics of these red light, red flag clients. So once they start saying things that make your alarm bells go off, or make your spidey sense be like, that was really weird, write that down and keep a log, keep a notebook. You can put it in Notion, you can put it in the Notes app on your phone, Evernote, I don't care. You need to have a list of personality traits, or certain things that they've said, phrases, or mistakes that you've made in contracts or with the work that like they really took poorly, like mistakes that you were like, ooh, I wish I didn't say that or do that, or they said this, or kind of those gummy, gross situations. Write those down. We're going to avoid these in the future. This is what I always build into both my runway students and my wealth lab students: awareness. In order to stop something, you need to be aware of it. In order to stop working with terrible freelance writing clients, you need to be aware of what to look for, what to watch out for, what to leave, what your boundaries are, right? This is what we're writing down. So you need to start writing these things down. And as you write them down, it'll become very clear if you start coming across more red light clients, or more clients that are just not the right fit for you. And this helps you leave the situation. This helps you get out of a contract. This helps you start becoming aware when things are going awry. So you need to write them down. Number 3 here, finish all your contracted work. So let's say you're in a financial pinch, which we have all been in when we are freelance writers or building our own business. You're in a financial pinch, finish the work. And in that time frame of finishing the work, make sure you're sending your LOIs or pitches, if you're working with magazines, to find a new client to replace them. So we're paying attention to when the contract ends, and we're paying attention to when that invoice is paid, and then we're going to not renew that contract. We're not going to ask for more work. We're not going to accept more work, but we are going to finish all of our work, because we want to make sure we have still good samples. Even though we're going to leave this client, I don't want you to just be like, fuck that shit, I'm out. You want to make sure that you finish that work well. I've seen a lot of writers just be like, I hate this client, I'm going to bomb all this work. And then they're like, oh no, I wish I had that sample. Don't do that. You still want to have this high quality work, because even if the relationship didn't work out, or the payment schedule, or that client was a pain in the butt to work with, you still want to have the clips. So finish all of your contracted work and make sure you get all the payments done, and then don't sweat over renewing that contract or continuing to work with that client. There's plenty of things that you can say to just end it. Hey, I have a project, a bigger, or not a bigger, but just say, I have a project coming up that ends up taking up more of my schedule than I thought, and I'm no longer able to renew our contract. You could just say, hey, I feel like we're not working on the same page with the type of content and the goals, so I think it's best if we end our contract here. Anything that you're doing with ending the relationship, you can always do it in a kind way, even if the client has not been kind. So finish your work, make sure it's high quality. The other thing here is that you be the squeaky wheel. So this is something that took me a very long time to embrace. Be the squeaky wheel. So if you finished all your contracted work and you have this nice contract that says you're owed money on X date or during X time frame, you have a certain net term. So net is like the amount of days after you invoice, right? So you invoice and it's net 14. So if you invoice 2 weeks later, you get paid. If you're not getting paid and you finished all the work, be the squeaky wheel. Live the squeaky wheel life. Set up different reminders, send payment emails, be the squeaky wheel, which basically means annoy them enough to get paid. So I've done this several times where I had a business that didn't pay me for 9 months. They were 9 months late on their payment. But being that squeaky wheel meant I got paid, and this was a particular situation where other people didn't get paid. So because I was the squeaky wheel, I got paid with whatever money the company had left, and other people didn't get paid at all. So being the squeaky wheel means you need to send those follow-up emails. You need to make sure you're paying attention to how far away that invoice hasn't been paid, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, whatever. There's a lot of ways to automate this. You could do this in Dubsado, which is what I like to use. I also like to use Boomerang, but these are really easy to kind of set up automatically. So every 2 weeks, or every week, you can start sending an automated email that you don't have to do anything. It just keeps sending it until they pay. For me, once it gets past a certain point, maybe like a month or 2 months or even 3 months, like I kind of escalate. So maybe the first one is every other week, then it turns to every week. Then once it gets past a certain place, I'm sending those automated emails every single day. That's the squeaky wheel life. And it gets you paid. It annoys people enough. Now, there's another thing that you can do that other people have done is put them on blast. So put them on LinkedIn or Twitter or like X or Instagram and say like, hey, @company isn't paying my invoice. And that has gotten people paid. I haven't done that, but I know other freelancers have publicly made it apparent that that company is not paying their freelancers or their invoices. And that becomes a serious PR problem for that company, so they pay your invoice. Going forward, when you're working with any type of client, change your payment terms. Make sure that you're not tying your payment terms to whenever the final piece of work is done, because that can lead to you not getting paid. So I like 50% upfront, 50% 30 days later, and that really helps you get paid so that it's not based on, like, let's say you cancel your contract and you don't finish the last part of the work, and then like they're like, well, I'm going to give you this percentage of the money, and you're like, I deserve this percentage. No, like if you have some kind of agreement where it's a milestone project where you're doing a bunch of different types of content, I still like 50% upfront, 50% 30 days later. If you have a retainer, you would schedule that differently. But most of the time I see that people make this mistake when they're like 50% upfront, 50% due at project completion, which is horrible because it could take fucking forever. So you want to make sure you're not doing that. So 50% upfront, 50% 30 days later, in addition to that 15-day out in your contract. Number 4, if you are in the middle of a project, so you're in the middle of a project and you're sweating over payment and you haven't gotten paid, but you have an upcoming deadline, stop. Stop doing all work immediately. If they haven't paid you and you have this upcoming deadline, that doesn't mean submit the work because you have a deadline. You don't honor the deadline when they're not honoring paying you. That's a huge mistake. So I see this all the time. We're in this frenzy of turning in work. We end up feeling like, oh my gosh, our client is going to pay me because I'm going to turn in the work, and they're going to see like that it's valuable, and they're going to feel like, oh, hey, I'm still on schedule. No. If you have 50% up front and they haven't paid that invoice, that means their deadline gets delayed until they pay that invoice. Or if you have more work to do for them and they haven't paid your last invoice, stop doing the work. Don't create more work for free. That you creating more work doesn't mean they're going to pay your invoice. And this has happened with all levels that I've seen. I've done this myself. I did this in the early years of my business. And I feel like a lot of times it's this fear that if you don't turn your work in on time, like that's a negative against you. It's a negative against them not paying you for the work that you're doing. So that deadline essentially dies when they're not paying you on time. So when they're not paying you, just think no payment, no content delivered. No payment, no content delivered. They're paying to make sure that thing gets there. Just like you would order food at a restaurant, right? So sometimes you'll pay ahead of time at a restaurant. Let's say you're getting burgers, you go pay for the burgers and then they deliver the burgers, right? That's kind of what we're doing here. Maybe if you're at a Michelin-starred restaurant, you eat your meal and then you get the bill, right? In this particular case, we're more like the burger restaurant. Now, I'm much more a fan of thinking of ourselves as Michelin-starred restaurants, but for payments, your client put you in a tight spot. They didn't pay you. You need to be paid for the work you're doing. So if they failed to pay you, you need to make sure that you're not doing any work. And what ends up happening, the other piece of this, is that clients will hold it over your head. So instead of them paying the invoice, what'll happen is they'll be like, well, you didn't submit your work, so I'm not paying it. Even though your contract terms say different, even though you guys agree to do something different, they will hold that over your head. Don't let that pressure you. Don't let that make you change your boundaries. Really what you want to do is just get the payment solved. And if they don't pay anything, then you don't turn in any content and none of your content is posted for free. The other thing too is that there is this suspicion sometimes when you have red flag or red light clients, they're like suspicious that you're like taking their money and run, which writers never do, which is the weirdest thing I think of, because writers are the almost the least likely people to do that. As far as I have seen throughout my career and in my own journey, we're like really insecure. We have a lot of fear and imposter syndrome and self-doubt. We're like grateful to get the money, right? We're like, oh my gosh, someone's paying me to write. And this is a mindset thing that we can talk about later, but I want you to not feel like them being suspicious that you're going to run off with their money makes any sense at all. It doesn't. Writers are very, very unlikely to ever take money and ghost. It does happen, of course, but it is really unlikely. So you want to make sure that you remember you're doing high quality work. You deserve to be paid for that, and that you're a joy to work with, right? So if you're doing all those things, they should be paying your invoice. It shouldn't be this weird suspicion where they're like, why should I give you money when you haven't done anything? And that's just not how this works. So in the future, I want you to make sure that you are setting up your payments as scheduled, right? 50% upfront, 50% 30 days later, or you set up some kind of retainer where you invoice on the first of the month and it's due mid-month. That way, all of the content is paid for upfront. Like the content in a retainer for that month is paid for upfront. You deliver the content at the end of the month. If you do 50% upfront, 50% 30 days later, a majority of the content hasn't even been created yet, so you still get paid for that content without having to wait a long time for, let's say, if your client delays or they want to change their mind or something else. So we want to make sure that we're setting up everything to be in our favor to get paid versus feeling pressured or like our boundaries are being broken by red light clients. Number 5 here, last one. Learn when to end your contract. So you want to learn when to end your contract and what to say. So sometimes you will have a crazy daisy client and you're just like, this is nut town. I have to leave. This is crazy daisy land. So I have a few phrases that I like to use to end the contract. And there's nothing wrong with ending a contract. It's just this relationship is not working out, whether they're not paying you or that they're not keeping to the scope of work, or they're trying to make you turn in work really quickly, even though your contract says that there's a rush fee if they want a deadline shorter than 7 days, or, it's just a mess, right? You want to just offload them, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. You will have to fire a client many, many times, or fire clients many, many times over the course of your business. So I have a few things that you should say. First one is, it sounds like we're not quite on the same page, and I want to make sure you have the right writer for your project. So it seems like it makes sense to end our contract. Short, simple, to the point. Second one here. My upcoming schedule's changed and I'm no longer able to work on this project. I'm happy to finish up our current deliverables, but then we'll need to end our agreement. Done, right? We're not referring them. We're not asking for questions. We're not like, what do you think about that? We're just like direct and to the point. And then the last one is after we've continued to work with feedback and revisions, it seems like we're not able to match on the same goals or focus. It may make more sense for you to work with another writer who's on the same page as you. So I'd like to end our contract after this deadline. That's it. I don't want you to over-explain. I don't want you to go nuts with being like, oh no, they're going to feel so bad, or they're not paying you. They're not abiding by the contract. They're not fun to work with. They are a headache. This is a really easy way to get out of the work and make sure that we just kind of end on like a kind but direct note. So we need to learn how to end our contract, right? What we're saying, but also when. So when you're looking at your contract, you need to make sure you're looking at like, how is this going? Do I want to keep doing this for another month or 3 months or 6 months? Is the money worth it? There's a lot of times where we will take money now where we're like, oh, thank God, money. And then 2 months later or 2 weeks later, we'll realize that it's not a good fit. So really kind of pay attention to personality quirks, how they work, the feedback they're giving you. Are they confusing? Are they difficult to work with? Are they actually paying your invoice? Are they abiding by the scope of work in the contract? We want to make sure we're working with people who really actually get it. So those green light clients, those high-end clients who are totally the opposite, not even the opposite, they're like a totally different planet. This is something that I talk about with students where they're wondering like, how do I actually move into that? How do I suss them out? How do I figure out if this is the right fit or not? This is why I created my free cheat sheet, my free seasoned veteran cheat sheet. If you go to mandyellis.com/cheat sheet, you can grab it. It tells you exactly what to do to suss out your clients. Not only how to make sure you're doing enough marketing, sending those LOIs to get the right clients, but questions to ask on your calls and things to do with onboarding that make sure you're not onboarding the wrong clients, or these questions that I have in the cheat sheet will help you get rid of red light clients. They will easily self-select out. So if you go to mandyellis.com/cheat sheet, you can grab it. And I want you to kind of remember these 5 things. We need to have these in place as safeguards to get away from bad freelance writing clients. Even if you have a contract, even if they owe you money, this is how we're going to kind of handle this. And the better that you can learn how to handle bad clients, it makes it so obvious when you work with great clients that you're like, oh, I would never go back there. I would never go back to, crazy daisy land with all those red light clients. So when we're doing these things, we're sticking to our boundaries. We are setting up right principles. And I want to remind you that it's okay to be the squeaky wheel. The squeaky wheel usually gets paid. And like I said, I've been in a situation where I got paid and other people didn't because the company crumbled. And that was because I was the squeaky wheel. So if you need to get paid after you've created content or submitted something, or you held up your end of the contract, live the squeaky wheel life. So I hope this was helpful. And in our next video, we're going to actually talk about those diamond clients. We're going to talk about those green light diamond clients. How do we find them? How do we attract them? How does that all work together? So now we can move away from red light clients and towards green light clients. So I will see you in the next video and hope you have a great week.